Well, what's that? There's another person that reviews videos that holds a glass of coffee in their hand every time? Yeah, that's right. I'm copying Jeremy Johns, but my glass is full of tea and not bourbon or coffee. Whatever. My body's a temple, people. My body's a temple. A rapidly decaying, unused temple that no one worships at. Anyways, I am Taylor. Welcome back to my channel, and this is going to be my review of Ms. Marvel, the new Disney Plus series that just wrapped up this week. And yeah, this is my second video review a review of video material in under a week because I'm running out of comic book content, people. Not really. I just wanted to mix it up a bit, and I like doing these reviews, and I like reviewing things more than I like opening mystery boxes, it turns out. So I'm going to review things and stuff. And yeah, we're going to talk about Ms. Marvel. Let's get into it. First of all, we're going to talk about the cast a bit, and overall, I thought the cast was pretty well done. Like, the casting and the characters, not bad. Iman Vellani as Ms. Marvel is fantastic. She's the standout of the show and like carries the show on her shoulders. And she's great. She's charming. She's funny. She's got the sense of innocence and naivete and enthusiasm that just radiates throughout the show. She is a gem. I don't know where they found her. I think they actually found her through like a Twitter casting call or a TikTok video or something like that. But yeah, she's amazing. And the cast that they picked to pick her to represent her family or play her family, words are hard. Also fantastic. The mother and the father are great. The older brother, fantastic. The older brother's wife or wife to be, depending on the episode, good. Didn't have a whole lot to do, but like the scene she was in, she was solid. The other characters in the series and the other actors, they're fine. Bruno, her best friend that has a crush on her, it's kind of cookie cutter, and the actor does what he can. I think it's just not kind of a whole lot of a meatiness to the role, and I don't know, maybe he's just not that meaty of an actor. That's right, I'm talking about the meatiness of actors, people. The meatiness of actors while I'm drinking tea. Green tea. And then there's the other characters. Kamran, decently well cast as a possible love interest slash villain slash powers, depending upon the episode. A little bit of spoilers here. Oh yeah, spoilers. I forgot to put that. I'll flash it up in the beginning, if I remember. The guy that played the Red Dagger, yeah, fine. Whatever. And then the clandestines, I don't know, whatever. They're very cookie cutter. And the main evil baddie, I can't remember her name, chews the scenery a bit when she's being evil. But, yeah, I don't know. And it's got the glare down, the evil glare. She really has an evil glare, but other than that, it's, fine. The plot is fairly typical Marvel 6 episode fare at this point. Marvel has this pattern they've set up, for good or ill. It seems like the last couple of shows have kind of like followed this, or at least Moon Knight in this show, and a couple of, I can't think of the others. Thinking of things is hard, people. And maybe it's not a pattern, but it feels like it. Because you have the first episode where the lost person finds their powers at the end of the episode. The second episode, it's the training montage. They learn about their powers and they expand things. And at the end, they meet somebody. Dun, dun, dun. Third-ish episode, oh no, that person they met is evil. Fourth, the hero learns more about their powers and goes off on a journey of self-discovery, and in this case, actual discovery. Fifth, a little bit of a filler where you learn some more backstory. And then sixth, big fight scene. That's the basic plot and formula of Moon Knight and of the show, and it kind of, yeah, it works for the most part. The show's not necessarily aimed at middle-aged white guys that drink green tea and talk about crap on YouTube. And I'm okay with that. And not every show needs to be aimed at me. I think representation is important. I think middle-aged white guys have had their moment in the sun, and it's time to let other people see some heroes they can maybe more relate to, some familial units they can relate to, some religious things that they can possibly relate to more than I can. That's all great, and I think for the most part it was handled pretty well. It's an entertaining show. It gets cheesy in places, and it's got this sort of light tone, and especially in the first episode. I keep saying issue. Comics, sorry. The first episode has all these like graffiti elements that move, and like when they're Kamala and Bruno are texting back and forth. It shows up in the scenery and stuff, and that was a very interesting element that like helped keep the tone very light and airy. And I thought they would continue that throughout the show. I think they Did not, for a few reasons, because also once Kamala got her powers, she was no longer living in this sort of fantasy bubble that she had kind of created for herself, like this, worship of Carol Danvers, this lost high schooler era, like a bit of her personality kind of disappeared as she found these powers and had to cope with them and like coming to grips with her familial identity and her powers and her place in the world and her place in the superhero world. I wish they would have kept up some of that. I think that would have been a great visual thing to keep going with. I know they didn't because A, there's a tonal shift that does occur throughout the series, and B, probably budget and time. I think the CGI department was kind of overloaded with light beam powers and other stuff and other effects, and just didn't have the time to sneak all the fun little tidbits in the background. But I kind of wish they were there. And yeah, I mentioned the tonal shift, and the tone does shift throughout the series. It does start super light, and it gets kind of dark in the middle. There's stabbings, there's shootings, there's people dying. They don't show the blood and the gore because it is Disney and it is aimed at a younger audience, but it's surprisingly like, oh, well, that character's not coming back unless it's a comic book thingy where they come back in a future show. Whoopsie. Yeah, and so there's that. I do think the show dipped in quality a bit in the middle. Episodes 4 and 5 are not my favorite, and that's where Kamala travels to see her grandmother and then goes back in time, and those are okay. I don't think they're crazy necessary to this. I get that the plot and the story, they had to set it up that way, but I think they could have told a more interesting story if they kind of just focused on Jersey and stayed in Jersey. And then the ending, I thought was solid. It is the typical kind of Marvel big episode fight scene. There's some twists to it that are fun, and her family accepts her as having her powers, and everyone lives happily ever after. And there's a big end credit shift, and a couple tidbits in the reveal in the end credit. I'll talk about those in a second. But yeah, that mostly worked. I do think the family, like the mother especially, in episode 1 started off being very stern and very like, you're not allowed to do anything. And by the end, she's like, oh no, you can do whatever the hell you want. We don't care. We trust you. And I understand there's supposed to be a journey on the family's part too. It just seemed a pretty abrupt shift. And if anything, that's like my biggest issue with this series is there are a few abrupt shifts. Like the clandestine, the big bads of the show, arguably, went from like, hey, you have this bracelet, you can help us get home at the end of episode 2, and then right away episode 3 is like, oh, it's been a couple hours, she's not helping, we're gonna go kill her and destroy her and take the bracelet and force her to do all this shit and terrify everybody. It's like, well, that seems kind of abrupt and sudden. Curse your sudden villainy. It is a superhero show. It is a Marvel show. They set up the 6-episode structure so they have to work in that time frame, I guess, but I think they probably could have shifted things out a bit, skipped that time travel stuff, made the villains like not become quite so villainous right away in episode 3, maybe made it in episode 4, I don't know, or 5, and maybe had Kamala be the trusting young naive teenager she kind of is and was, and whatever. But that is nitpicking. I know they also changed Kamala's powers from the comics. I'm not super familiar with the comic book material. I've not really read a lot of it. I know G. Willow Wilson is a creator and also was a writer on this series and had some input and makes a cameo in the last episode on one of the TikTok vids. But I think there's people up in arms that she's not doing the straight, stretchy, and beginning powers. And it's more light-based, and they changed her background to be a Jinn, which is the clandestine, instead of an Inhuman. Back when Kamala was created, Marvel was making everybody an Inhuman because they didn't have the rights to the mutants. That was owned by Fox, so all the X-Men properties and everything else was owned by Fox. So they didn't make Kamala a mutant or anything because they didn't want to let Fox have the rights to these characters. So everyone was an Inhuman. Terrigon Mist and blah-de-blah-de-blah. Turns out the Inhumans are pretty goddamn boring, and a lot of people like the mutants better. So by the end of this one, there's a little teaser with the X-Men theme song, and Bruno's like, hey, you're a mutant. And they're setting up Kamala to be a mutant, which I think is actually probably more interesting, can lead down more interesting paths in the future. I mean, like, Marvel has dropped several Easter eggs saying the X-Men are coming. There's Doctor Strange 2, there's this. And, they're on their way, and it's now looking like Kamala might be a mutant instead of an Inhuman, and that's fine. And her light-based powers are not the just straight stretchiness and beginning thing that was in the comics. I think they did that for a couple of reasons. I do think Mr. Fantastic is coming with the Fantastic Four, and they wanted to differentiate the powers a bit visually. And also, I think it's a lot easier for them to do light-based and that kind of effects. like making stretching stuff that have it look real when you have the flesh tones and all that stuff to deal with, I think is pretty tricky with CGI. I'm not 100% sure, but I know that the internet was all up in arms when the first She-Hulk trailer dropped, and that's a fairly flesh-based character, obviously with green, and they're like, well, that looks like garbage. So I think they were worried that the powers would look like garbage if that's what they did. So, it's yeah. But again, I don't care. I'm not married to the source material. I think they made changes that made sense for the show. They resurrected this team nobody gave a flying rat's ass about, called the Clandestines. They made Kamala a Jinn, and that, sure, I think it all works. Yeah, on the whole, I think it's one of Marvel's better shows, and it's at least a bit of a breath of fresh air, especially. Like I said, Iman Vellani. She is fantastic, and she carries the whole damn show on her shoulders and does a great job with it. It's not the best show Marvel's ever done. That probably is either still WandaVision or possibly the Loki show, depending upon who you ask. But I do think it's better than, like, say, Moon Knight. Probably better than Hawkeye. Better than Captain and Winter Soldier. It's not a bad show. I know there's also people up in arms that it's like, oh, this show is made for kids and it's not aimed at me. Well, fucking fine, people. It's not aimed at you. You can still enjoy it. Like, if you go back and watch kids' cartoons now, they're not aimed at you, but they can still be enjoyable. And I think this is an enjoyable show. I recommend watching it. I think if you give it a chance, you'll like it. I think it might help open your eyes a little bit culturally, and I think if that's a good thing in every regard. And also, it has a fantastic soundtrack. So if you just listen for the music, you'll have a good time. And so that's what I thought of Ms. Marvel. Let me know. Have you watched it? Do you agree with me? Do you think it's hot garbage? Do you want me to keep doing more of these kind of TV reviewy things? Should I always try and match my yellow shirt to the Doom Patrol poster in the background? Let me know in the comments down below. And yeah, that's what I've got. I'm going to get out of here. And don't be a dick. Even if you're an unfleshed out villain in a Marvel TV series that gets suddenly offed in episode 5. See ya.